Jonathan's told me a little bit about me, told you a little bit about me, I'm sorry. I'd like to know a little bit about you. Who here believes in climate change? Yay! It's not a good thing, but yes, I'm glad you all believe. How about sea level rise? How about the tooth fairy, since we're believing a lot? So we use the word belief in a lot of interesting ways. I used to be so upset when we would talk about whether you believed in climate change or not. It's science. You don't believe in science. It's just true or it's not true. But then I realized that in Galileo's time, the belief that we would revolve around the sun rather than the world being Earth-centric, heliocentric, was huge. He was declared an agnostic. He was excommunicated from the church. He was jailed for dialogues discussing the Copernican theory, of the solar system rather than continuing with the idea of what Aristotle had started so many years ago. The church was very threatened by it. There's a sliding scale between science and belief. During the Stone Age, there was a little bit of science, lots of belief. By the time of Galileo, it had changed. We're at a different point now. But just like in Galileo's time, I think climate change is so threatening to so many people that they can't get it into a scientific framework. They want to keep it as a belief because there's a possibility it's not true. Science is telling us that climate change is going to be hugely important. Now, I focus mostly on sea level rise, and that's what I'm going to be talking about this evening. But if you look at this night picture of the coast, of the world, you can find most of the coastlines by those lights. And where there are lights, there are people living. Jonathan showed a great picture of huge communities along the coast. There are a million points of light showing how threatening sea level rise and climate change is going to be. If you don't like the lights, here's some numbers. These are over 10 years old, so 146 million people living within 1 meter of sea level rise. It's probably 150 million by now. 2% of the global assets of the world are within 1 meter of sea level rise, for sea level. Sea level rise is going to put those in huge jeopardy. What we're seeing already is that during high tides, low-lying communities have what's called sunny day flooding. This wasn't because of a storm or anything, it's just because of sea level. High tides along a coastal community. And then when this water goes back into the ocean, it's going to take with it all the pollutants that were on the streets. We're losing agricultural land in California. Around the world, we're losing huge amounts of agricultural land because the dikes that we built are no longer adequate to protect those ag lands. And the ag lands are probably not valuable enough to put in major fortifications. Plus, once you've had water, salt water, sitting on ag land for a while, it's not going to be agriculturally productive for a long time. These are some pictures. I've done a lot of field investigations after major storm events, hurricanes and tsunamis, and those people living within 5 and 10 meters of sea level rise, there are huge consequences from tsunamis, from hurricanes, from major storms. The people who are living right along the coast, wonderful as it is, are being really threatened. And if you don't want to believe in sea level rise, you can think that things are going to be fine for those people, but for the situations they have today. With sea level rise, this is all going to get worse. One of my favorite people. The good thing about science is it's true, whether you believe it or not. So here's a graph that's showing some of science. I can't believe the number of people who put this together, but it's an incredible graph. So these are thousands of years along the bottom. We're talking about tens of meters of sea level rise. But what's really interesting, do I have a red thing on here? Anyway, right here, the last 6,000 years, what do you think we've done? The pyramids, most of our cities, most of our countries, most of what's existing that we think of as development today has happened while there's been a very flat amount of sea level rise. At the very end here, there's a little line, a little black line that's going up. It's out of proportion for time, but not for rate, of the amount of sea level rise we observed over the past 20 years. There's a blow up of this over more plausible, reasonable, we can think about it time from the 1700s till now and then going on to 2100. You can see again, it's been flat, 1700 to 1800, and then it starts going up. The Industrial Revolution was around then. There's a huge link between fossil fuel consumption, human expansion, and that rise in sea level. So the end part is speculation. Well, it's a little bit more than speculation. It's science that's coming from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change about what we were likely to experience by the rest of this century for sea level rise. We haven't gone through it yet, so we don't know exactly what it's going to be, and it's a huge range. But there is a scale for that sea level rise. It's the Ewing scale. Patrick Ewing. 7 foot. So if he's standing today at a dry spot right next to the water, maybe by the end of this century, he'll be up to his socks in water. Maybe a little bit at his waist. Remember, he's 7 feet. This is not my waist. This is Patrick's waist, and he's all legs. But there are a lot of people who think that the IPCC numbers might be wrong. They could be low. In fact, the National Climate Assessment for the US says that it's possible that we could have sea level rise up to 2 meters. Well, Patrick at 7 feet is still going to just be up to his neck. Most of us, other than Sylvia, who can swim and just hold her breath for hours, most of us are going to be in trouble once we have 6 feet, 6.5 feet of sea level rise. We don't know what those numbers are going to be, but there's a huge potential that the world is going to be a very different place in the future than it is right now. So this is Autodesk. We've got their motto: imagine, design, create. So I'm going to close with some challenges for everyone here in the audience. Imagine, design, and create ways that we can be up to Patrick's socks and not up to his neck. One of the key issues is going to be fossil fuel use. This is a power plant in the Bay Area. It's pretty low. It's going to be threatened by sea level rise, and it's going to become obsolete. Do we replace it with another fossil fuel plant, or do we find ways to replace it with alternative fuels that are going to keep us from having huge emissions of the fossil fuel energy that has so driven our economy in the Industrial Revolution? There's a quote by somebody in Abu Dhabi, I believe he's the Minister of Energy there, saying, "The Stone Age did not end because we ran out of stones." So let's hope that this dependence on fossil fuel can end before we run out of fossil fuel. Otherwise, we're up to Patrick's neck and many other necks. We're up to real problems with the world. So we need people to start thinking about innovative, cool ways of providing energy for the planet. Even if we end up bringing water only to Patrick's socks, we're going to need engineering. We're going to need good engineering. So I've been on a couple of disaster investigations on that side. I'm really bad with rights and lefts, and especially if I have to turn around to do it. The far side is a tsunami barrier that was erected in Japan. They're really good with engineering, but they really undersized the connections for this wall. We need to do better engineering in the future. If we're going to use engineering as a solution, we need to do it well. This house is in Galveston after Hurricane Ike. All of the homes, home site, home site, home site, all the homes around it wiped out completely, which is a horrible thing to come back to. But these people's homes were built 10% higher, 10% stronger, and 10% more robust. They were called fortified homes, and they survived. They might not survive the next hurricane. We need to think about what those are going to be, but we can engineer to survive against very significant events if that's what we want to do. That's a lot of resources, so we've got to think about where we're going to put those resources and not put them. But engineering is going to have to be part of our solution. And then this is from the tsunami in Samoa on that far side. That wave is breaking. That's a tsunami wave breaking on a reef. Most of the energy was dissipated on that reef. so that the areas inland experience flooding, but not that huge whoosh of water that can come in and then leave. They weren't knocked off their foundations and homes. The homes were flooded, and then the water went away. Same with this community, this home in Japan. All of the area around it was so devastating. All those homes were lost. But there were 3 or 4 homes nestled in the trees. These trees provided enough of an energy dissipation for these homes that the homes were flooded. They took out all of their mats and bedding and stuff, but they had a home to come back to because it wasn't washed away. We've got to think better and learn more about what nature can do as far as helping us go into the 21st, advance into the 21st century more. And then there's land use planning and being smart. I was in Galveston 3 months after Hurricane Ike went through. Somebody was already trying to sell land where there had been a home and was no longer there. I really don't think we can tell people at this stage you can't come back and rebuild. We've got to plan ahead. We've got to be able to say, if there is a huge disaster and your home's lost, think about where you want to move next. It's not fair to tell people when they've already been hit and they're down that, double hit, you can't move back either. We've got to start planning for what we're going to do in the future as more and more communities are being stressed by climate change and sea level rise. So since I've been using everybody else's quotes all evening, or my minute time, I'm going to finish with 2 more. One of the greatest assets to have in life is patience and wisdom. You all have the wisdom to come up with responses and ways to help us get out of this potential of being up to our neck in water. But it's going to take time. But then also, there will be time. But the best time to start is now. So thank you for your attention.